the great thing is you can almost do anything. You can change anything. Anything can be patched up to anything. Anything can trigger anything.
Richard Northwood is the keyboard player for Roxy Magic, a tribute to Roxy Music and Bryan Ferry, who last year completed their 20th anniversary tour.
Welcome, Richard.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. It's good to see you.
Fantastic, man. So great. Look, you've been in this show about 10 years.
Yeah.
Can we start by talking about a little about how you came to join the show?
Yeah, I went for an audition because they were after a new keyboard player. I've been playing with an 80s band and fancied something a bit more, focused tribute.
Sure.
And nothing really came of that. And then about 3 years later, Kevin Hackett, who does the Bryan Ferry, contacted me and said, "Oh, by the way, would you fancy playing with us?" And I thought, well, yeah, absolutely, why not? So it sort of went on from there, really.
Fantastic. So there's of course, with the Roxy music, there's there's a wide range from the 70s to the 80s. It's a real change of sound. So I know it was a while ago, but do you remember sort of your process, how you sort of started, how you sort of think, okay, how am I going to learn these songs? How am I going to get these sounds together?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's one of the big attractions of the music and the band is just the sheer breadth of the music, from stuff that's really sort of early punk almost, Editions of You, to some of the real sort of Lounge Lizard stuff, that the Ferry solo stuff. So yeah, it's the process. It depends on the song. I mean, some you're literally just a piano with some string backing, and other ones are very complicated with samples and all kinds of things going off. So yeah, it just really depends. But it is a great, fantastic, wide range of music, which is lovely.
And of course, I'm right in saying in the early stuff, Brian Eno did a lot of work.
Yeah.
So was it sort of modular synthesis? What was going on in the early stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it was more sound effects, really.
Okay.
A lot of that. I mean, obviously, Ferry did most of the keyboard work anyway, and then Eno would be sort of putting effects, synth sounds, which are quite tricky to sort of emulate, to be honest. But in a live situation, it all sounds okay. So, yeah, I mean, people do say, when you say you're in a Roxy Music tribute, they say, "Oh, you're Brian Eno," and you have to remind them, actually, he wasn't with the band for that long. Actually.
Excellent.
Say, do you dress up like Brian Eno? And I thought, well, no, because I'd look absolutely ridiculous doing
that. Oh, that's great. Your singer sounds and looks like Bryan Ferry.
Absolutely, yeah, fantastic. It's quite uncanny at times. You have to sort of remind yourself that he's not Brian Eno. Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
You guys are touring throughout the UK. Can you tell us a little bit about your rig, just as far as what you take on stage and what sort of bits of it you use for which bits?
I mean, I'm renowned in the band in being able to strip down my rig and be in my car and away down the motorway by the time the drummer's just sort of thinking about packing away. Yeah, I try and travel light nowadays. Mainly, because of age and my back. So at the moment, I'm using a Kurzweil PC3, which is a fantastic bit of kit. I mean, it's showing its age now, but it does the job. And it's built like a tank. Yeah. And then I was using a Yamaha CP40, but I now use a CP73, which is a bit lighter. So that's really for the piano stuff. And that's it. I have gone out with much bigger rigs in the past, and you just don't need to do it now.
Sure. Times have changed a lot. What about sort of monitoring? Do you have do you have old school wedge monitors, or do you go in ears?
No, I use a wedge. I did toy with in ears and I tried it. I don't know if I've got funny shaped ears, but it was so painful.
Oh
Um,
no.
Plus, I couldn't really hear any of the bass um, sounds well enough. So, and of course, the problem with playing when you're playing piano or something, you just start pumping your left hand even harder. So yeah, I gave up on those. They soon got sold on eBay. So
There you go.
yeah,
Fantastic. So the Kurzweil is an interesting one, isn't it? So
yeah.
am I right in saying, looking back through your history, there was a bit of Pink Floyd tributes there as well? Is that sort of where you
Yeah, I mean
went down that route?
that was my biggest rig because I was using my main keyboard then was a cool Triton,
Nice.
which is a beautiful instrument, and I wish I'd never got rid of it.
Right.
But um, it just became unreliable. It had to be repaired so many times.
Right.
Um, it as you probably know, it's all the jacks on the back are sort of hardwired onto the motherboard.
Okay.
So consequently, any sort of knocks on them in flight cases,
Oh,
and it was constantly being resoldered. And it's the one thing I love about the Kurzweil is the metal chassis and everything's actually screwed onto the metal chassis and then wired back to a board. So it's just that sort of tank feeling of the Kurzweil really. But the cool Triton was great, and I used a Kurzweil piano, PC78, I think it was called, a VK8 organ, Roland VK8. And then I had a rack with Novation synth in it, JV 1080,
nice.
various other bits and pieces in there. So yeah, it was quite a big rig, but really the Triton sort of controlled everything. It would send messages to everything to next patch and kind of thing, and everything would go off. Yeah.
Marais said that. So we had Sean McCausland from That'll Be the Day, who's got a Kurzweil. I'm not sure it's the same model as yours, and he was sort of demonstrating some of the sounds, but some of the sounds. So they're very realistic.
Mm.
Is that so? The sort of brasses really sparkle, don't they? And
Yeah. I mean,
what's
that was the Kurzweils. We used a lot in sort of Broadway shows and things like that. Um, yeah, I mean, they're an absolute pig to do anything with. I mean, because obviously, you're playing for weeks and weeks, and then you think, oh, I've got to change something, and it's out with a manual and try and work out where the hell that thing was that you had to change, and it's just impossible. The great thing is, you can almost do anything. You can change anything. Anything can be patched up to anything. Anything can trigger anything. Which wasn't the same on the cool Triton. Obviously you can do that with that. But yeah, that's the great thing about Kurzweils.
so just thinking a little bit about all that the songs that you play with Roxy Music. So which were the ones with sort of the biggest challenges? Which were the ones that made you go, okay, we've got to do a bit of work on this one?
Oh, crikey. Yeah, I suppose it's the ones where there's exposed keyboard parts and people are expecting to hear a certain sound. Um, and then the other ones are, of course, the ones where you know it's perhaps just the keyboards and you're very exposed and you don't want to mess it up for anyone else. Even if the part's easy, you're still the heart's going a bit because it's a tricky part to get right. Um, but yeah, I mean, all the songs have got their challenges, really. Just trying to think what's a really tricky song. I mean, to be honest, none of them are that tricky keyboard
Okay.
wise. Um, as I say, it's the ones that with the exposed bits that you worry about, but nothing's there's not massive sort of synth solos that have got to be spot on, like in a Pink Floyd band, people would expect to hear certain sounds and certain long because I remember certainly with some of the Pink Floyd stuff, you'd be thinking, crikey, this is a 15-minute number we're doing now, and once you start, that's a lot of material to cover.
Once you start, you're in. So just with you guys, I mean, you're traveling all over the country. You're a very, very busy band. So just, for people who's watching this who may, be thinking about getting into music, looking for a little inspiration, a little knowledge of how things work. So, typical gig day. So, it's Saturday. What's your typical gig day?
Yeah, it depends on the venue really. I mean, we're doing a lot of theatre work now, so which is nice in one way because you generally kick off at 7:30, which means get in there for sort of 4, something like that. So it really depends where it is in the country, really. I mean, the band are roughly all around the Midlands,
Right.
but not in any particular place. So we generally don't travel together. We do have a van for some, you know, for going up to Scotland and things like that.
Right.
So yeah, it's a case of getting there sort of 2 or 3 hours before. You know, we don't have our own sound people, so we tend to just hire in or use venue sound people, which obviously can have its own problems. Particularly the venue that got very confused and didn't provide any sound system at all. And then we're rather surprised when we said, "Well, are you actually not going to mic anything up?" And
Oh no.
we've all had them.
Oh dear. Oh no. But of course, the Midlands is in the UK is a great place to be situated for a theatre company, of course, because there's so much in that area, up a little north, and of course further north and south. You're pretty much good to go almost anywhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you know, it's great being able to, you know, get on the motorway, bomb up to Manchester or up further than that, or down the M5 down to Exeter or something, cross to the other side. You know, you can, yeah, as you say, there's a lot of places you get to in 2 or 3 hours, which is great, really. I mean, some of the other venues obviously are more, you know, you're starting at 9 o'clock or something like that. You know, they still want you there before doors open at 6 or 7 or something. So
Sure.
that can be a really long day.
Yeah.
You know, especially some of the London ones where, you know, you finish at midnight and then put this, you know, pack down and try and get around the M25 that they've shot in various places, and you know, yeah, it's just awful. I mean, you know, as you probably know, Friday night, Saturday night is when they decide to do all the work on the motorways and shut them. So,
Sure. And the diversions don't go anywhere.
so
So sound check, because you've got the saxophone.
yeah, sax player does different saxes, sort of extra percussion and oboe as well. So yeah, it's yeah, so there's quite a lot to sort of set up. But yeah, we generally don't take too long because we all know what we're doing. We've got the stuff sort of set up within half an hour. So it's pretty slick, really.
Nice. So just we spoke a little bit about some of the keyboards, and so you sent me some information. I had a read through, and I had obviously checked out the you know, the social medias and things. And now you're a classically trained musician, studied for a master's in composition, and right next to that, you said and you used the Fairlight. So I've got to ask you. I've seen pictures. I've heard it a million times. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness! To actually sit down on one, and I believe it's quite a lot of work to operate those things. You tell us a little bit about the Fairlight.
Yeah, I was really lucky actually to be doing that, and because I was doing a master's, I had priority to use the thing as well. So which was great, you know. Other people had to use it at 3 o'clock in the morning, whereas I could sort of walk in there and say it's mine now for the day, you know.
Oh, fantastic!
But yeah, I mean, looking back at its capabilities, you know, you'd laugh nowadays. You'd probably have an app on your phone that would do it.
Yeah.
It was, you know, it had 2 floppy disks, big disks, you know.
Yeah.
It yeah, it took ages to load up. You had to load the operating system first,
Right.
then you'd load in sounds and things, files and whatever. It could only do 8 note polyphony, so 8 notes at a
Right.
time. You know, which nowadays you laugh at. You know,
Yeah.
the and the bandwidth was just appalling. I mean, things like cymbals or something just sounded like nothing. You know, it was just so. But you know, it was exciting, and you could do things like it. I mean, I was using it and taking, say, one sound, and it had a really interesting feature where you could morph from one sound into another.
Okay.
Now, again, today we'd think, yes, so what? But in
Yeah.
those days, this is at 1985. This was like,
Yeah.
wow, you can suddenly change this oboe into an electric guitar, and it was great. The sound would just morph into something else. So yeah, it was great fun to use it, and a great privilege really. Because looking back, you think, yeah, I was using it, and Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush, and
Yeah.
they weren't using the same one, I have to
No.
say. But we weren't fighting over the same one.
Am I right in saying that it came with sort of some it came with a disc, is that right? With some sounds on it. And you can pretty much, I guess some people on YouTube have got those sounds, and you can pretty much go, okay, in that song there, you can hear that sound. And
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, it was because it was an Australian company, wasn't it? And they did produce various sounds you could put in, apart from sampling your own, obviously, that you could do. But as I say, to use it on its own, if you just used the Fairlight, you'd have this terrible sort of restrictive bandwidth of sound. You had to put other things in there, like sort of DX7 or something, to give some top end. Yeah, it was great fun. Great fun.
fantastic. What a great thing to have done, especially at that time it was something so used by people like Trevor Horn and
Yeah,
the Pet Shop Boys and everything. It was over everything.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. So, and then we were just talking about the gigs a moment ago, and look, you play to a wide variety of audiences, and yeah, you mentioned earlier on. Am I right in saying that Rick Wakeman turned up to one of the gigs?
Yeah. Well, I should say it wasn't actually the gig; it was the
Okay.
sound check,
Okay.
which was possibly, I mean, one of the most exciting and also one of the most daunting moments of my life. My very first record I ever got was Six Miles of Henry VIII.
Right.
Um, and he's obviously been a great hero of mine,
Of course.
as I'm sure most keyboard players. To suddenly look out and realise that Rick Wakeman is standing there while you're doing a sound check
Oh,
was something else. We were ticked off that he might be coming because he knew the promoter,
okay.
and he came, and just such a nice guy. I mean, it was just
Right.
chatting to afterwards, and I said, "Oh, do you know much Roxy music?" And he said, "No," and I said, "Oh, goodness."
Oh.
But I'm safe at last. And then the promoter said, "Oh," he said, "Oh, Rick, are you hungry? Because the band, they've got food back there. There's all kinds of bits and pieces." I thought, "This is fantastic. I'm going to share my quiche with Rick
Oh,
Wakeman."
wow.
Unfortunately, he said he wasn't hungry, so we didn't share our quiche. But,
Oh,
but no, it was great. It was great.
that must have got the blood pressure going.
It
Sweaty
certainly did.
palms.
But what a nice guy. He's so down to earth. It's just like
Fantastic.
chatting with an old friend, basically.
Oh, that's so great. Right, and also just looking back through your history, some interesting things there. You mentioned around the Roland AX1, a guitar. Now, I'm a guitar player, I
Right.
admit, and I know this divides people, but I love a guitar. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, it was when I played in an 80s band for a few years, and I thought, well, I've got to have one of these. And it wasn't, it was just really MIDIing back. I got a
Yeah,
wireless MIDI and MIDIing back to my keyboards.
sure.
I must say, I didn't get on with it really. It was more of a looks than anything else.
Sure.
I found two big problems with it. Firstly, at the angle that you're playing at was almost impossible to play anything really. If you were doing relaxed Frankie Goes to Hollywood, you could just about get out the front there and do a bit with it. But then I found the other problem was going around different venues, because your sound was going through a certain wedge. You'd run over to the other side of the stage with the bass player, where of course there was no keyboards at all. And then you'd either have to tick the sound people off to say, look, when I move over there, can I have some keyboards because I can't hear it? So with those two things, the inability to play the thing because of the angle and also the fact you could never hear it when you moved around. Yes, it didn't last that long, I have to say. I still hanker after getting one, but I think in Roxy Music, I think probably the rest of the band would frown at the idea of me dancing around the stage with it.
Oh, that's great. And you also are a multi-instrumentalist. You've played bass in bands and in prog bands. You play you said your main instruments are piano and cello. So just tell us a little bit. So what sort of things have you done?
Yeah, no, my main instrument is actually the cello, but I'm a very lapsed cellist. It really doesn't come out of the case now. So it just sits there. But that was actually my first study instrument was
Oh,
cello.
wow.
Um, but I did get it out the other day, and my wife said, "Oh, I thought you were supposed to be able to play it," which I thought,
Oh,
but it's like all those things, isn't it? If you don't play them, you lose the muscle power and everything else. And you know, an instrument like that needs an awful lot of practice, I'm afraid.
right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, bass was nice. I actually enjoyed playing bass, and had a nice fretless bass as well at the time, which I played in the prog band.
Okay.
Um, so that was a nice experience.
Nice. So, just as far as music you're listening to, then for sort of pleasure, is it
Yeah.
what do you listen to for pleasure? Do you sort of lean towards the prog thing?
Um, yeah, I do. I mean, I think at the moment I've got the latest Steve Hackett album I've just been listening to,
Nice.
Peter Gabriel, which I think were just their two albums last year were just the most stunning albums out, really. Um, but I do have a bit of a weakness for Dream Theater as well, so
Nice.
something a bit heavier. I mean, obviously, a great keyboard player in there, um, another hero of mine. Um, and then a general sort of weakness for fun things. I mean, I suppose I should admit I'm a great Kiss fan, I'm afraid, as
Nice.
well.
Okay.
Which is no keyboards at all, but it's just the fun of it, really. And in the reincarnation, I think I would have been playing bass in a Kiss tribute, really. But
Ah.
yeah.
What a great thing to do.
You get away with looking the part, wouldn't you? Because you just have to have the right makeup on, really. So,
Sure.
yeah.
That's
But yeah, no,
fantastic.
one of the things. I mean, obviously, and there's classical stuff I listen to as well. I mean, to be honest, I listen to most things. I'll try anything once. Um, but yeah, I guess I'm a bit stuck in the '80s, really, a lot of the time.
Very much like myself. I'm yeah, it's hard to get out. 70s and 80s. There we go. When you look back over the sort of recent years, do any of the sort of gigs stand out to you? Is there any ones that go, well, that was great. That was fun. And what sort of made it like that?
Ooh, crikey. Yeah, the one bit Wakeman turning up to was an interesting one, but
Of course.
um, I suppose it's the ones really where you have a really good audience and they really go for it. Um, when you do the theatres and they're kind of sold out and people are really coming up to you afterwards or in the interval and saying, "Oh, it's just fantastic," and also when you get a good range of age of people. We've had some people that are just into their 20s who have
Right.
actually been to say things, actually been to see Bryan Ferry last year,
Oh,
and actually
wow.
said I have to say, preferred seeing us because it was kind of, more embracing of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So
Playing the
that's
hits.
yeah. So that's kind of nice when people are really enjoying it. But that's what we all do it for, isn't it? Really. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if someone's watching this now and they're thinking, I'd really like to play more, perhaps to get into theatre work, perhaps to get out there gigging more. What's a what bits of advice would you give for somebody who really wants to sort of progress their career musically?
I think just obviously listen to a lot of things. Lots of different keyboard players because you can learn so much by listening to other people. And there's so much material out now on YouTube. How people do things. Um, and I think there's always other things you can learn. I mean, I'm I've been looking at using things like Gig Performer,
Okay.
to go away from sort of lots of hardware synths really. And I'm still toying with it, but I'm just not sure I want to go out with a laptop, and I know lots of people do. But if you can get out there with two keyboards and wire them up in 10 minutes, and jobs are good and really. But there's always things I think people can pick up on. I mean, I think something I could pick up on would be arpeggiators. I don't use arpeggiators much. I don't need to in Roxy music, but
No.
that was just a for instance.
Yeah.
There's always something you can think, actually, yeah, I could really do something with that. Yeah, or tap tempo. Things with tap tempo. Um, I toyed with tap tempo once, and it just kept misfiring. It just wouldn't
Oh no.
match in. And I just thought, no, I can't stand this. I'm not going to do it. I may have just been the Kurzweil tap tempo. I don't know, but and then you hear other things that are happening. Like I think the Yamaha, the new Yamaha's Mode X ones. They've actually got a way of listening to an audio and actually picking up the tempo. So you could stick a mic inside the bass drum, and it'll pick up the tempo for you.
Wow.
That kind of opens up all kinds of possibilities. You could have arpeggiators automatically latched to the drummer. So yeah, new developments all the time, aren't
That does. I hadn't heard of that. So that's fascinating. So,
they? Yeah.
gosh, that really does open up stuff. Um,
I think
Fantastic.
it's the Modi X does it, but it's one of the new Yamaha synths, and it wasn't an expensive one either. And you just think, kind of new possibilities there.
Yeah, yeah. When you talk about tap tempo, are you referring to with a delay, trying to match the delay?
So if you've got say an arpeggiation going on or something like that, and you want it to be absolutely in sync with the drummer,
Okay.
you can just tap it. Well, on the Kurzweil, you can assign any key you want,
Okay.
and just keep tapping it with the tempo, and it'll sync the arpeggio to the tapping that you're doing, to the tap tempo.
Oh wow.
Um, but a lot of keyboards have actually got a button dedicated to tap tempo as well, or you can patch it to a foot pedal, and then pray that it works.
Well, there we go. I'm going to go and read my manuals as soon as we finish this. Let's see if I
Yeah.
got something. That sounds fascinating. Excellent. Thank you so much. So you can catch up with Roxy Magic on Facebook and also on roxymagic.co.uk. Richard, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really very grateful for your time and for sharing your expertise. And it's been great to talk to you.
Yeah, and you. Thank you.
Thanks.